Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Schreibman, and today I'll be doing my final presentation on the impacts of the European Union in Europe. I will be discussing in three ways how it impacts different bodies. First, the citizens of Europe. I will next be talking about businesses and business owners expanding, and also for the prosperity of the country. The European Union has done a lot of great things for many people throughout the world, not just Europeans, but it especially has benefited Europeans. It's benefited their economy and has thus improved their quality of life. So, the history of the EU. After World War II, Europe was in shambles. There was just the Second World War in 2 decades, and there weren't many workers because a lot of them had passed during the war, and the economies were in shambles. Um, they created different alliances, economic and general alliances throughout Europe. And it wasn't until 1986 that the Single European Act was signed. And this paved the way for a single market and a unified Europe. After that was the Maastricht Treaty, signed in the Netherlands in 1992. And that really is what established the European Union. It wasn't big at all, but as you see throughout the graph, many countries have joined throughout the year, with a wave of 1995, 2007, and the largest being in 2004. Even recently, Croatia joined 7 years ago after being a war torn nation after mass devastation in the 90s. So, with all these new countries joining, they need to update the Constitution. So in 1997, the Treaty of Amsterdam updated the bylaws of Europe. And then the Treaty of Nice did so 4 years later to ensure that it would be fine with all these new countries joining. So, as I discussed, there are currently 27 member states. As you see on the map, it is all the green states, all from Europe. It is looked very highly upon as considered one of the best unions of all time throughout the world. Like I discussed previously, there's been waves of interest. It is a long process to join. Some countries who joined in 2007 are still not on the euro because it takes so long to switch over. And that's just the final step. Joining the EU alone could take almost half a decade. Like I said earlier, the Europe was in a lot of trouble after World War II. Lots of debt, not many young, able-bodied workers, the economies were destroyed, and there was mass divide. The World War was primarily between multiple European alliances, the Allies and the Axis. There was also a lack of trust there. After nearly 30 years of fighting between the two wars, no one wanted to be friends with someone who they'd been enemies with for so long. So, it made it difficult for Europe to create a single market. That was a problem because there was so much potential there for them all to unify. As the EU was created, as I showed you in the time show, their goal was to provide four main services, do four things. Allow for workers and inhabitants to be in any European Union country with free border transport. You can move your money throughout Europe with one currency, or if a country is not in the Eurozone, easy exchanges. They can sell goods without restrictions, which is really creating the one single market, the great concept of the European Union. Also, you can provide services on the same basis. Someone in France who wants to buy coffee can get it anywhere in Europe for the same price with no import taxes, opposed to just French coffee, and vice versa with Germans wanting French wine. First, I'll talk about the first group of shareholders, the citizens. That's everyone that makes up Europe. Very important group, every person. The quality of life standards are heavily influenced by being the European Union. The European Union has a lot of rules and regulations on how people can live. This includes sanitation, monopolies for resources, things like gas and electric, workplace incidents, things like that. They have you covered. Also, if you're traveling within the European Union, they protect your rights as you travel to different countries. If you want to buy goods from a different country, like us speaking of earlier, if a German wanted to get some French wine, it ends up that they buy some online and the French company tries to scam them. They can get refunds and returns protected by the European Union for goods all throughout Europe. This is a big deal because this promotes not only business but customers, making the economy do even better. These business standards, like I was talking about, the European Union is very strict on these single market businesses and want to make sure that it's a healthy marketplace. So what they do is they have these regulations and they're constantly looking up on these companies to make sure that the citizens are getting treated fairly and no one's gouging them. Also, they have a lot of education. They allow for citizens to get cheap and free education to go into the workforce and make something for themselves. Next, I'll talk about how the businesses are benefited. Like I said, there's the single market in the European Union. That means that anyone can sell to anyone in Europe. If you're from Belgium and there's 10 million people that live there roughly, well, once you go into the European Union, there's 500 million. So that means you have 50 times the amount of people to sell to. That increased numbers of buyers is massive. Like any business knows, it's all about supply and demand. The greater the demand for your product, the better you will do overall. That's why it's so big for people to be in this market. Also, there's a lack of tariffs. If you're in the production of an iPhone, like we know, the components come from all over the world. If you were to find a way to do it just in the European Union, you wouldn't have to pay tariffs on the glass coming from one country, different mechanisms coming from the other. It'll make building something way better. Not only that, when you want to sell the products at the end of the life cycle, you now have no tariffs. So someone in Spain would be just as likely to buy a German phone as they would be to buy a Spanish phone. Because if the German one's better, there's no reason for them not to. It won't cost more, like an American buying a German car. That's a really big deal because that promotes the best product to win in the marketplace, thus benefiting the consumers and a good business. Finally, we'll talk about the countries and how they're benefited. With all these business improvements I've been telling you about, there's increased tax income. A lot of these small European countries, their economy would not thrive on their own. There's a lot of competition from major industrial resources like China and the United States. But with this marketplace advantages, which no other place in the world has, they can find a way to still do well. Not only that, but their workers have mobility. If their country is booming economically, there can be an influx of workers. Let's say Portugal is not having a good economy right now, but Spain is. Portuguese workers can go to Spain easy, no checks at the border. They can get in just by showing their passport, and they can boost Spain's economy. And then when it flips around, the workers can go back and Spanish can follow them, making it so the economies don't have such a burden on them, and they can do even better when they are in a time of thriving. Also, allegiances. The European Union is so tight, a European country can know they'll have support of their allies if a foreign nation were to attack or if a foreign nation were to oppose a tax on them. If they were in a trade war with China or North Korea, let's say France was, they would know that the rest of the European Union would enter the trade war with them, and this would take away one of the greatest economies in the world for that nation to trade with. Now I'll talk specifically about the Eurozone. The Eurozone is the 19 countries that have adopted the euro. It was implemented at the new decade, at 2000, and 19 members have joined it. Though that wasn't the case in the beginning. It takes many years to join, as some who applied 5 years ago are still not in the program yet. It's the single monetary unit, the euro. This is great because as all these new countries come, this makes a currency that people can spend wherever they want in Europe. It's a universal currency and works very well for people to trade with other people and makes it easier to travel. The euro has a single conversion. The price is international and will fluctuate on the international market. The rates will change, and if one country is not doing well, other countries can support them, like when Greece was in a crisis just a few years ago. This is great for business because it allows a single unit and you don't have to worry about conversion fees while trading with another country. The tourism. Tourism is affected greatly by the EU. The borders are open for people to travel throughout. There's a single currency, so that's one of the biggest issues for travelers. They don't have to deal with the currency. They don't have to worry about being scammed when they go to a foreign country. They know exactly what they're doing. The European Union provides civil protections and refunds and returns on flights, training, and goods bought too. So Europeans really know that no matter where they're traveling throughout Europe, they'll always be protected, which encourages them to do that and benefits the economy. Just a few facts I want to share with you before I go. There are 400 million people in the European Union. And that's all passport-free travel. You can take a train from the north of Europe all the way to Spain by just showing your passport once. The GDP of Europe is $16.5 trillion. That's 22.8% of the world, even though their population of the world is under 7%. Also, like I said, it's the most recognizable organization of all time. They won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2012 for their great achievements. That's all I have to share. I really hope that you learn how much the European Union and the Eurozone using the euro currency has benefited European citizens.